Hello and welcome to Transmission. Tonight I am joined by the lovely Toni. Welcome.
Thank you.
How are you today?
I'm feeling good.
Yeah. So, look, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? So, you were saying earlier, originally born in sort of the Philippines. So, grew up in the Philippines.
Grew up in the Philippines.
Yeah.
I came to Australia in 2011, and I started fully transitioning in 2012.
Yeah. Okay. And so, did you come to Australia just specifically to transition, or did you just come to Australia as, for fun?
It's basically the Australian dream of every Filipino nurse.
Yeah.
To work in Australia, because at that time, the United States was no longer easy to get into for work.
Yeah.
So the next best thing is Australia at that time. But I never had really the American dream, but I had the Australian dream. So I came to Australia and did my bridging course for nurses, and found a job in Canberra. So basically the story really is coming to Australia is to work and provide for the family I have left in the Philippines.
Yeah. And so when you came to Australia, had you started to transition?
I started taking hormones at 15, so in the Philippines, and but stopped because in the Philippines, you have to buy it. You can't. There's no such a thing as Medicare covering it for you, or that convenience that we have or that we are enjoying here. So yeah, I started taking hormones, but on and off since 15. And when I saw that it's okay to transition in Australia, then I went to a GP and talked about, my plans, and yeah, it started from there.
And so how did you find in terms of working sort of as a nurse and transitioning sort of whilst working? How was sort of the response of people that you're working with?
Look, people in Canberra are very supportive of me. My colleagues, they're very supportive. I kind of conditioned them that this is who I am. I started changing my hair, and then, changing the way I dress, put a bit of makeup on. And then when I went for a long annual leave, I came back and, I had these twins. So everybody was like, oh my God. Is this gonna be all the way now? And everybody everybody was very supportive. Yeah,
that's really good. And I know that you've mentioned that you were involved with the Miss Gay and Miss Transsexual pageant.
Yeah.
How long have you been involved with that?
I won in 2012, February 2012, a runner-up. And after that, because it's a duty to be able to continue the pageant, so we kind of being the winner supported the pageant. This pageant has been going on for 6 years now. And this pageant is geared towards better understanding and awareness. And the reception of the people it's very good too. So people have been going to the pageant for 6 years now.
And so you won in 2012. So what was sort of involved in the pageant? What sort of do you have to do? Is it sort of just sort of dressing up, or
it's basically a competition. At that time, we have to present a talent, which is part of the criteria for judging in order to win. So we had to come out to the stage wearing our swimsuits. We had national costume, or the festival costumes. And a question and answer portion. It's, a beauty pageant. It's a competition, but at the same time, it's a celebration of life. I met a lot of very good friends through this pageant. And this year, I mean next year, which is of course 2015, we're planning to pursue the pageant and make it international, invite girls from other countries.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're working on that at the moment. Yeah.
That's fantastic. And so you said you had to do a talent. So what was your talent?
I sang Oleta Adams' Get Here. Basically, that's one of the things I do on the side. I perform, I sing with a group called 3TD. I sing with other two transgender girls.
Yeah.
And we perform anywhere in Australia. So basically, we do corporate shows. We're working on our next concert, which will be in Canberra on the 6th of September.
Yeah.
This year, I started this year when I moved from Canberra to Melbourne.
Yeah.
So I live now permanently in Melbourne, and so I, gave my 100% commitment to the group.
Yeah.
And you see, we're gonna be performing in Victoria very often.
Yeah. And what sort of music do you perform?
I grew up listening to Michael Jackson, Aretha Franklin, Dionne Warwick. So I basically like soul music, R&B music.
Yeah. And do you find in terms of with singing and performing, do you prefer to sort of sing female, sort of the deep, strong female performers' songs?
Yeah. But I can sing songs that were done by, by the male people or male vocalists. But I use my speaking voice. I sing in this voice. So, yeah. I don't know if that answered your question, but yeah.
Good. And so you've been doing that. So, and how much sort of of your time does that take up, going out and performing?
It's very... It takes a lot of work to be able to produce a show. So in 2 months we have one show, or in a month we have one.
Yeah.
And the rest of the days in that month will be spent practicing for the show.
And so how many songs would you perform sort of, and is it sort of dancing, singing, that sort of stuff?
Yeah. There's about 15 girls and boys in the group, so we distribute the numbers.
Yeah.
But me being a singer, I usually would have 4 to 5 numbers, and yes, some of them will be with the other girls, my trio members.
Okay. Cool. Look, I would love to continue to talk to you, but unfortunately we're running out of time. So a big thank you for coming on and sharing a bit of your story. So a big thank you to Toni. You've been watching Transmission.
Welcome back to Transmission. Words can be powerful things. Listen now to hear trans people describe trans people.
What words do you like to use to describe people who transition their gender?
Yeah, gender diverse. I don't know. Yeah, I don't want to... I think that's nice and broad. Like, I don't think... Yeah. Lots of people obviously like using lots of different terms, so I think gender diverse sort of is a nice, easy term. No one should get offended with that.
What words do you like to use to describe people who transition their gender?
I call myself trans. I ask other people what they like to be referred to as, but yeah, for myself I just say trans, but I can also be stealth and, just refer to myself as male as well. So it depends where I am, but mainly just male, yeah. Yep.
Just people, really, normal people. I just prefer to kind of accept everybody as however they are, and that's really, to me, that's the best thing anybody can do to me, is just accept me as a person,
Powerful, courageous. Yeah.
What words do you like to use to describe people who transition their gender?
What words?
So like trans, transsexual, way cool.
Okay, I call myself a trans guy, but Really, I just refer to them as guys or girls. I mean, I don't kind of get too technical on labels. I think there's too many of them.
Well, I think it's... Well, it really depends. I don't know. You've stumped me on that one. I think it is courageous. I think it's a difficult thing, especially when you have to tell people that that's what you're doing and you're asking people to respect your pronouns. So I think you have to build a lot of resilience. So I think courage is a word that I would use. I think trans people are beautiful. I think that trans people have an experience of life that's unique to a lot of other people. And I think if you have those experiences of sort of seeing the world from two different sides or three different sides, I think that can sort of make someone a much more empathetic and understanding and patient person.
Well, I think that's up to the individual. I like transgendered, or just, if I'm writing it, to write trans with a little star, which just sort of means anything, whatever the person identifies as.
I go for affirmed identity or affirmation, I think, which is positive. Transition, nothing wrong with that word, but do we trans? We can debate that one all day, but affirmed just sits most comfortably with me. I think it is a very personal thing, and everyone has a right to the words that they want.
People. People are people, and they'll do what they can to be happy. I don't use a lot of words.
What words do you like to use to describe people who transition their gender?
Pronouns, whatever they prefer.
Whatever words you like.
Yeah. Look, whatever. It depends on who you're with. Like my girlfriends were just bitch and whatever else we're going on about, but I prefer they as a pronoun, but I've gotten to a point now where it's like, if you don't get they, then she'll do, and think I need to put that on a badge or a t-shirt, just because there's people, I feel like sometimes people feel like they're being nice by calling me sir. Like, oh no, wouldn't want to get it wrong, wouldn't want to call you female, that would be, worse or whatever. And so I just feel like I just want to walk around slapping people half the time. Just go with they and babe.
Usually, I guess if I was pressed, I would use transgender, but I would love to live in a world that didn't have to rely on labels at all, and where everybody could just be themselves and didn't have to, label themselves to everyone to feel comfortable.
Friends, people. It's a strange question, to be honest.
What words do you like to use to describe people who transition their gender?
To describe people who transition their gender?
Yeah.
Well, personally, I just go by what people prefer to be called, or described as. Some people prefer to use the term like, trans or F to M to F. Is that what you're sort of talking about there?
Whatever you like. You can say whatever you like.
Some people prefer gender fluid, or gender fucked, gender diverse. Personally, I think it's all about the individual, where the individual's at. And me, I'm quite happy with the title of transgender, because I like being visible about that part of my life. Not too visible, but I like to have it. And I understand that not everybody is like that, so.
Trans. I don't add transsexual, transgender, transgendered, just trans, because it seems to not say anything that's wrong.
Courageous, usually very intelligent, and almost always gorgeous. So.
Well, it depends. Male to female, call them girls, women. That's all they really are. They're nothing else. I hear a lot of people call them trannies or transsexuals. I absolutely hate those words. They're derogatory, they're misconstrued. Don't use them. But girls, transgender's fine. Trans T-girls is another one that I've heard used a lot, especially last night. But yeah, those are words that are okay, but essentially we're just girls.
What about the trans boys?
Trans boys, same thing. Just call them men, boys. Yeah, I don't see the need to go trans male or trans female. You know, we present ourselves as male or female. That's how we want to be identified.
Whatever pronoun they prefer. So yeah, I call them him, her, they.
I guess we don't have a global definition that the whole community identifies with, and I like the term trans.
What words do you like to use to describe people who transition their gender?
Gender diverse.
There's more transmission after this short break.
Welcome back to Transmission on Bent TV. I'm Sammy Cameron, and today we're talking about trans laws and rights. Joining me today are Sally, Andrew and Greer. Thank you for joining us today.
Pleasure.
So are trans people treated as equal in the eyes of the law? And how does the law protect trans people from discrimination and stigma?
The main area of coverage is the Federal Equal Opportunity Law that came into effect on the 1st of August 2013, which covers all gender identities, male, female, all points around, across, behind, diagonal, and gives a lot of coverage and goes further than the state law that came in 2000.
So there's a lot of protection.
Yeah, largely protected. I'd say that there are a couple of exemptions, unfortunately, but in a lot of day-to-day things, going into a shop, most employment, clubs, membership of clubs, accommodation, yes, we have to be treated equally.
If I may add to that, the practical application of that law is really evident now, that the freedom that generally we have to be able to go around into any shop, purchase any product or service is a direct result of those law changes, and I think that's really important to note.
Definitely. Could be life-saving even, I'd say, in some cases.
And employment is covered. So if you transition at work, that sort of thing is now covered and you're protected.
Yeah, so that's the legal aspect, and also the Victorian Equal Opportunity Human Rights Commission, who are a good source of information, developed some employer guidelines about a year ago, which they're due to update a bit, but they're on their website and flesh out the sort of day-to-day details of how to deal with names and pronouns and bathrooms and all those sorts of things.
But there is still a long way to go in that, because there are individuals, and I am aware of one where having difficulties with the transition process at work because of individuals at the hierarchy.
And I suppose smaller companies, smaller organisations are going to perhaps be more challenging than larger, higher profile organisations?
Not necessarily. This one's a fairly large organisation, and it's really sad that they're not implementing the law as it's currently is.
So what areas does the federal legislation not cover?
Both the federal and state laws have two major areas of exemption, and that's so-called competitive sporting activity, and it covers all trans and can disadvantage all of, well, pretty much everyone in a way, trans women, trans men, so that's people, trans women, people born with male bodies who need to live as female, trans men and people other than male or female. And the other area is exemptions for religious charities. You can't just say all of religion. If I go into a shop, they say, my religion says I can't serve you. No, that's definitely not on. But a so-called religious charity can say, well, it's our religious belief that we feel that trans people are wrong or whatever, and we can discriminate. But it's also, there's a problem in it, it's often not transparent whether they want to follow that or not.
That would be affecting aged care.
That's actually the one, we'll say exemption to the exemption, which is really good. When the federal law went through last year, federally funded aged care providers cannot even use the religious excuse. And the good thing was the three main services, Uniting, Anglican and Catholic, were all quite okay with that, which is really good. So that's a great thing for our trans and GLBTI seniors to have a bit of dignity at the end.
But if you're an employee, say, at a religious school, if you're a teacher, for example, then you can be discriminated, you can be fired from your job and there's no protection.
Sadly, that's the case, yeah. Trans or, again, GLBTI and other single mothers or other things too, yeah.
And as I sort of will say, it's up to the people to apply the law. And in terms of this, we're talking about job discrimination with if you're in the job and changing, but getting a job is entirely another thing. You can never prove the discrimination. You can change your ID and therefore you can change all your employment things, but here you are at 40 changing, and where's your work history? So if you come out as trans and they're actually a bit transphobic, the employer employing you, well, you're just not going to get the job. So there's practice and there's law.
Okay. So maybe it's actually a good point to start talking about then. So we have the laws in place that protect us in many, many instances, but what about in real life when you're actually dealing with someone in a shop?
Well, in real life, I think it's been, by and large, very positive. Every place I go to, people just treat you with respect because, there's no reason not to, and that's a direct result of those changes all those years ago. And even services such as a police service, I was a passenger in a car that got booked for speeding, but the policeman was very positive and very supportive, even though he still had to issue the fine. But that's a separate issue, because we were treated just as somebody who was speeding, not somebody who was strange.
Yeah. I think there's a few things that come out of this discussion that, I agree that it is a case-by-case basis. A friend who is a teacher put on her resume after transition to female that she was a trans woman, didn't get interviews, just said woman, changed her resume, got 6 interviews immediately into job offers, and so there is, unfortunately, that's still out there. But I think that if you do feel you're experiencing discrimination in any setting, employment or anything, my strong advice would be document. The moment you think something's going wrong, make a note of it and start sending it, if it's a big company or whatever, to your HR department, or just make sure you have that evidence and say, this happened on the 13th of July and I'm documenting this on the 14th or whatever, can be really helpful.
So what sorts of organisations are out there to help people? So agree, document what's actually happening, diarise it so you've got some records. But who do you call for help? Who can actually help you? You feel discriminated against, you feel like the law has been broken. What should you do? Who should you contact?
Well, for the police, for instance, they have their GLOs, as they call them, the gay, lesbian liaison officers, who deal with the whole alphabet community, and they're the first point of contact. If you have an issue that you felt being unfairly treated by the police because you are trans, then there is a function in the police force to deal with that.
What about in employment? Who should you go to?
Who are you going to call?
Who are you going to call?
2 places to call: the Victorian Equal Opportunity and Human Rights Commission and the Australian Human Rights Commission. And it can be a little bit of a jurisdictional issue. Do I call the state or the federal one? But usually a quick call will sort out which is the one to go and then do a detailed complaint to. And the good thing is their processes are conciliatory and more informal, so it's not like a court where you might have to go on record. And apparently there's an 80% success rate in Victoria of reconciliation in a fair way that's a sort of win-win solution, both for the individual and that can often result in education that can prevent it happening again.
Okay. Just one last thing I wanted to cover. What's the situation for people that don't want to associate with necessarily having an M or an F on a form? So what support is there for people legally when people have to provide information?
There is now, at a federal level only, the so-called sex and gender guidelines, which are based on 2 principles, and that is get sex and gender off a form if it's not needed, because we don't ask religion or, well, football team, or is that the same thing? But, because it's not necessary. But if it is needed, then it must be based on affirmed identity, including other than male or female as an option.
Thank you. I'd like to thank Sally, Andrew and Greer for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
I'm Sammy Cameron on Transmission for Vent TV. Look forward to seeing you next time.